Right.
Hey, Greg, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I hope a little question. What our translation calls a science of substance, is that the same thing as what we're calling a science of being?
Yes. Yes. Right. But we don't know how, the text hasn't given us enough material so that we can understand that equivalence yet, right? We know that substance is most basic, but we don't yet know really what things qualify as substance, and we don't know how being relates to substance. So those are still up in the air for us. And they will be for a while. But actually, this chapter beta that we're going through, I mean, it's a ton of puzzles, and yeah, this actually relates to what Brendan was saying about not ever having encountered anything perfect. You'd have to know what the criterion of perfection is, and it's precisely because you don't know the criterion of perfection that you've never encountered anything perfect. It's not because nothing's out there, or that nothing's in here that might not be perfect. And the reason why I'm slowing down with these puzzles in Aristotle is because of the claim he makes at the beginning that you will not understand down the road whether a solution is a solution or not if you don't understand the puzzle it's a solution to. And so we're going through the puzzles that it is the task of metaphysics to solve, and only if you understand the thickness of these puzzles will you understand the adequacy or inadequacy of what is later offered as solutions. There's no progress without knowing the problems. And then it's only in knowing the problems that you can recognize a solution, not as a further problem, but as precisely the solution to these puzzles. That makes sense. So we're learning so what we're doing is we're learning the criteria for what a solution is in metaphysics. We're not just assuming we know what a solution looks like or what it means to solve a problem in metaphysics. We're acquiring this understanding. We're acquiring these criteria in working through the puzzles.
Yeah, I have a technical issue.
Oh yeah.
I basically have a brand new computer and I forgot to share my screen with Zoom, which means I have to quit. And since I'm the host, it's a little complicated quitting without.
Oh, so
can anybody else share the screen for the text? Otherwise I have to.
Does anybody have a digital copy of the text on hand? Otherwise I'll download it from my Google Drive. And then,
we're doing CDC Reeve.
Yeah, the metaphysics.
Yeah, I guess I can share my screen.
So Peter, do you have to entitle him or give him permission or something to do that?
I will look into that and I will find.
Yeah, I am not allowed. It says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me see if I can.
While Peter's working on that, Garth, you have your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Oh, I just wanted to comment that what you're saying really seems to be evidenced by how many aporetic dialogues there are among Plato's writings, right? Like a lot of people really try to read those to say Plato's really setting down a definite thesis about this or that thing, but they're so aporetic that a lot of what people say Plato said, maybe he didn't really say that.
Right. Awesome. So let's see. Garth, are you able to share?
Share now, Garth?
Yay. All right. All right, let's dive into more of these puzzles. Actually, yeah.
Can you make it wider?
Oh yeah.
I mean, fill up the.
Oh,
have-
yeah, hold on. I literally never done this before. I'm just like checking
Yeah.
out, like it's different, like using Zoom when I'm sharing my screen because the like menu becomes completely different.
It might be
Yeah,
to
everything dissolves. It's
magnify the
really annoying.
text, but yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh, that's much better.
Excellent. So,
If you can get rid of any gray side.
we got a purist here.
Well, I mean, just saying that like half the screen width is taken up by gray on both sides. And yeah, there you go. That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, this PDF program looks horrible. Maybe I should try reopening it in Firefox.
It's fine. It's fine. Let's roll with it. So while I have a bunch of people here, I was thinking about the schedule for the rest of the year. And one thing's not working for me very well, and that's the 8 weeks on and then like 4 weeks off. It seems kind of arbitrary. And so what I would like to do, and the other thing is that sometimes a week doesn't give me enough prep time because I'm doing other things, and I really start panicking like by Tuesday, and by Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I'm a complete nervous wreck. So I sometimes feel like I need. So what I would love to do, and as long as most of you are down with this, is go to a 2-week schedule, and then no breaks, just 2-week schedule for the rest of the year. And then if you travel, that's okay. You can miss 1 or 2 or something like that. We won't be engaging in as much text, a big swath of text, because a lot of these sections we need to read very closely. And so you won't miss that much. And there are recordings for when you do miss. But that way, if you miss one, then that still allows you like a whole month of vacation without having to worry about missing too much Aristotle. And I know a lot of that would really freak you out to know that you're missing a lot of this Aristotle.
That confused
and
me.
I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want to happen.
That confused me. I'm not sure what you meant by a 2-week schedule.
All right. So instead of meeting every week and with a break, we just meet every 2 weeks with no breaks. We just truck through the rest of the year, and that would give us a chance to we'll digest some of this a little bit, and also it might what might happen, depending on how things go, is maybe we'll have gotten through enough Aristotle by the end of the summer that that I could add an additional course, like parallel on a different day of every 2 weeks of doing Plotinus, because by then we'll recognize how much Plotinus owes to Aristotle and is criticizing Aristotle, and so he'll become much more recognizable and less inscrutable by then. So that's an option. I know some people want to get to Plotinus sooner rather than later, and on the trajectory we're on, we're definitely not going to get to him before next year. So
Michael, it will be 2 weeks to the next session then, or?
well, if everybody's cool with that, if that works for people, or 90% of you, then yes. As a matter of fact, it would be 2 weeks from today, because I can't be here next week anyway. I'll be traveling.
Michael, just wondering, like, or later on, do you want to maybe like work it out such that like you and Sandy are in alternate weeks? Because like I know from what I understand, like you're interested in like her group,
Sure,
our
yeah.
group on the Friday, and then she's also here, and then like if you guys alternate weeks, then that also kind of gives you guys both as organizers more time to focus and prepare, and then
That's a great idea.
alternatively.
But let me see. So Sandy's group is meeting this week as well, right? So she'll be meeting. So we would be on the same week schedule if I start going 2 weeks from.
Maybe it's going to be a weird schedule for her. So I mean, so maybe like see later how it settles out after May.
Right. Okay. Yeah. No. That's a good suggestion. Maybe I can work that out with us, just between me and Sandy, and see how we can figure that out. But as of right now, just for clarity's sake, I'd love to just say from here on out, we're meeting every 2 weeks. We're going to dig into the text a little bit more. I don't think that anybody's served by summaries or just skimming the surface of the text. So and see how that goes. We will not be reading this entire work anyway, so there'll be several chapters that will be that we'll be skipping or only reading sections of. So you don't need to get too anxious that, you know, we'll never reach the end at our snail's pace. So I saw somebody wanted to speak. Who was that?
There were a couple thumbs up.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine with me. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Oh, it was Clark. Clark was starting to say something, but then disappeared. I don't know if he's driving and broke up.
Mhm.
You're welcome to get in edgewise anytime, Clark. All right, so let's let's get started. So just as introductory remarks, I would love to start actually by going back a little bit to section A2 in the Reeve translation. That would be 4 and 5. And I'd just like to rehearse briefly how Aristotle's thinking about wisdom, right? And what we can expect from wisdom, or the knowledge of the causes that that this whole book is actually basically an inquiry into. Is there such thing as wisdom? Wisdom being defined as knowledge of the starting points and causes, right? And maybe it's easy to lose track of the fact that he's actually asking a question and he hasn't answered it yet, right? But what he's been doing is adducing criteria, or adducing some evidence about what that science would have to be if it were to be wisdom. Okay, so I keep talking in the subjunctive tense, right? Because we don't know if there's wisdom. This text hasn't told us that there's wisdom, but we have to understand that it is a methodical inquiry into the possibility of wisdom. And so when he talks about the science of causes, that science is wisdom. And so in a sense, we would be fulfilling the promise of philosophy, right? Philosophy is the friend of wisdom. Well, we friends of wisdom accompany Aristotle on the journey from being just a friend of wisdom to actually attaining wisdom. And that's part of the transformational aspect of this text, one might say. But we have to always kind of remind ourselves that A, we don't know if this science, this wisdom exists, or if it's possible, and B, what the basic contours of it would have to be if it were to be wisdom. And to take up a word that's already been used today, he does that at the very beginning inductively. He just takes some sayings and some opinions of his time, and that give us an indication about what this highest knowledge might be like. And from there, he brings us to starting to focus on causes, on these 4 causes. And those are part of what the puzzles that we're dealing with now. It's the fact that there are 4 causes that constitutes a problem for science, for the science of wisdom, or the science of being, right? Or the science of substance. These are all synonyms. Right. Science of being, science of substance, wisdom. These are 3 different ways of talking about the exact same thing. So at A2 on page 4 of the Reeve edition, I just wanted to read briefly, and then if anybody wanted to comment or question, what he says about what he concludes from his initial loose methodical approach to asking the question, what would wisdom have to be for us to recognize it as wisdom? So this, right, if you could scroll down just a little bit more, Aristotle summarizes his loose methodical inductive inquiry at the where it says first, right? So I'll read that here briefly. And this is just, when we use the word wisdom, we probably have a lot of associations about what that is. And that probably don't come from Aristotle. And so I just want to kind of remind us of what is this thing that we're searching for, and why does it get the name wisdom? All right, so reading middle of the page, beginning with first. First, then, we take it that what a wise person has scientific knowledge about is all things, insofar as they admit of it, without his having particular scientific knowledge of them. Very important. We're not talking about omniscience. Everybody wants to talk about philosophical absolute knowledge as some kind of omniscience, but this is just knowledge of all things without having particular scientific knowledge of them, which means there's room for particular sciences. Next, we take it that the person who has the capacity to know difficult things, that is, things that are not easy for humans to know, he is wise. For perception is common to all, which is why it is easy and involves no wisdom. Further, we take it that someone is wiser in any science if he is a more exact knower of it and a better teacher of the causes. I'm just going to embellish here. Better teachers of the causes, that would be the ability to demonstrate from the causes using the tools of demonstrative science why things are the way they are, why they have the properties they do. So the teacher is the one who demonstrates. Also, we take it that among the sciences, the one choice-worthy for the sake of itself and for the knowing of it is more theoretical wisdom than one choice-worthy for the sake of results. Given our language that we've been accustoming ourselves to over the last weeks, one might say that to explicate what he just said there, why is it more choice-worthy? Because it's more explanatory, because we understand the why of it and not just the pragmatic uses of something. Knowing the pragmatic uses of it is practical, and it's focused on results. Knowing the reason why, comprehending the why, is a theoretical activity, and will explain, for instance, why these results-oriented sciences can be successful. Also, we take a more ruling science to be wisdom more than a subordinate one. For a wise person should prescribe, not be prescribed to, and should be obeyed by the less wise, not by someone else. Such then are the sort and number of suppositions we hold about theoretical wisdom and theoretically wise people. Just a little bit further onto the next page, if you wouldn't mind, Garth. Of these, scientific knowledge of all things necessarily belongs to the person who most of all has universal scientific knowledge, since he in a way knows all things that fall under it, in a way. And what that way is one of the things that we're investigating. We don't know yet. The most universal things of all, however, are pretty much the most difficult for humans to know, since they are furthest from perception. And the most exact of the sciences are the ones concerned most of all with the primary things, the first things. Since the sciences which proceed from fewer things, for example, arithmetic, in parentheses, that which is more one, are more exact than those that proceed from addition, for example, geometry. But then, too, the one that provides theoretical scientific knowledge of the causes is more teachable, since teaching is what those people do, that is, those who state the causes of each thing. Okay, I'm just jumping down here a little bit, a couple lines. And what is most scientifically knowable of all are the primary things and causes, since it is through these and proceeding from these that we know the other things, not these because of the ones that fall under them. Okay, so we don't know what is primary by examining what's secondary. We need to know what's primary in order to explicate and understand that which is secondary. Okay, I think I've read enough. I mean, everybody read that a couple
Well,
weeks ago. Yeah.
We should finish off that one sentence because,
Oh, please do.
but the most ruling of the sciences, that is the one that is ruling rather than subordinate, is the one that knows that for the sake of which each thing is to be done. And this is the good of each of them. And in general, the best good in all of nature. Because he talks about the good later in
Thank
B2.
Right.
And he also
so-
mentions here, as he did earlier, about the more ruling science, and there's some are subordinate, and
Mhm.
there's a hierarchy to these.
Exactly. So, no, I appreciate that. Brendan.
Yeah, so that really reminds me of I think it's the prologue or some at the beginning of the Critique of Pure Reason. He's describing metaphysics as the what was it, queen of the sciences. Or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Yeah, that's what that reminds me of. He's just kind of laying it out, and I think Kant's kind of remembering probably this passage right here that we're doing.
Well, you know that I wish Kant was that well read.
Did he not read Aristotle? No, of course he did. It was the first academic.
No, you know, but there was a lot of Aristotle in the schools that he grew up in, but he didn't know Greek, and he didn't read the original texts. So his knowledge of text went back to basically Descartes and Spinoza and Wolff.
Huh.
So, but yeah, no, but thank you. That just shows that the continuity of this Aristotelian thought is uninterrupted from Aristotle's time, almost uninterrupted, into modernity, and we're still grappling with the questions and the potential of this most difficult science, the metaphysics.
Yeah, which he negates the possibility of.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So we're
Exactly.
gonna like. Thank you.
Hey, Richard. Thanks, Brendan. Go ahead, Richard.
Just wanting to kind of get a clarification on what's meant by R3.
Okay, yeah. Right. Okay. You mean how he's using the word exact? Sorry, Richard, you're muted.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Charlie, you want to jump in on that?
No, I want to ask a question when you're finished with that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So exact doesn't quite mean what we mean by it. I'm not even sure what we mean by it, but it means more fundamental and more explanatory. So if you get a principle that explains more things, you're more exact than if you have a principle that explains less things, right? So the exactness has something to do with the scope of explanatory power that a principle has. And obviously the first and most primary ones will be the most exact because they will have the widest scope of explanatory power.
Okay, that's what I kind of was drawing from, I think, the context, trying to see past, the associations of like exact, meaning precision. So like the former is something more widely foundational, whereas proceeding from so the addition is sort of more kind of an extension into something more of a niche, like area of knowledge or science. That's what okay.
No, it's very interesting you brought up precision, because it derives from praecidere of Latin, which is like an act of abstraction. It's like cutting away, cutting something from something. So to be precise is, so to speak, get smaller and smaller in what it is that you're looking at. So that kind of precision is very, very different than this exactness, which has to do with the explanatory scope.
Right. Like, I mean, also like, decision also has the same kind of.
Oh, yes, exactly.
Etymology.
Yeah, thank you.
Like when we decide, we cut away that which we, now no longer go down that path. Right?
That's right. And the precision still has the resonance in our language with to prescind. I don't know if you ever use that word, right? But it's to prescind is to is basically an act of abstraction, to only look at certain things and not look at other things. So that would mean that every form of precision is a form of blindness, because there's more and more stuff that you're not looking at. Whereas Aristotelian exactness is getting more and more in the scope of your thought. So it's becoming, the more exact you are in Aristotle, the less blind you are. But that's not how the Latin, and that's not how these words came down to us, interestingly enough. Awesome. I hope that's
Yeah.
helped.
I can't, I guess I can't raise my hand because I'm screen sharing, but I wanted to make a quick comment that seems like if you are dealing with geometry rather than arithmetic, in some sense you are relying on perception. And so it might be less exact in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. And I think he makes that point somewhere. So thanks for introducing that consideration, because it might come in very useful. I got Charlie and then Clark.
Okay, I'm glad you read that section toward the end of the paragraph.
I have to
where
thank Peter for that.
finished it up. What is most scientifically knowable of all are the primary things and causes, since it is through these and proceeding from these that we know the other things.
Right.
I thought it was just the other way around. That, the old non in intellectu nisi prius in sensu.
Right.
That was from our perceptions that we understand, the particular, we understand substance, and then we understand species and genus, and then, and that is how we arrived at the universal and at the causes,
Right.
categories.
Yeah, no, I think the short answer is that perceptions give rise to the problems, but you have to rise to the level of explanatory intelligibles to make sense of them. And so the perception is intrinsically unclear, even though it's closest, he says it's closest to us, but it's farthest from the truth. And whatever's closest to us is farthest from the truth.
Right.
Right.
Maybe this means here that once you have gotten to the primary things, then you're able to explain.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think that works great. So Mike, I see a hand going.
Oh, and sorry to cut in front of everyone, but I did want to address Charlie's question.
Cool.
Is primary thing a primary substance? And if it is, isn't that a particular?
Not necessarily.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm sorry to be so vague, but I want to say don't lean too heavily on that assumption that substances are particular, right? That's how they've been introduced to us, right? But that's not where we're going to end up. Okay. So Clark.
Yeah, that kind of goes towards the question I had, which I'm trying to get clear on. But so I'm trying to express to myself in Aristotelian terms, what's the difference between a person who has wisdom and a person who does not? What is there something ontological, something in terms of the being of that person? And is it a particular that makes that person able to dwell in the realm of causality, wisdom, and what's the other? I mean, these are all synonyms.
Right. So the knowledge of being, knowledge of substance, and wisdom. Those are the synonyms I've listed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, knowledge of being.
No, okay.
I'm just wondering, is it a particular? Does a person in gaining this knowledge of causes, of being, I mean, how does it? I'm trying to understand the terminology of being and the activity of a cause,
right,
with the personage that it is in as a particular.
Oh, so you want, so basically what you're saying is you really want to read the book De Anima first to find out about the soul and the intellect and what happens with them in knowledge before we hit the metaphysics. You're starting, you're going the opposite direction, which, you know, which is a really good thing to do too. My short answer is no, there is no ontological shift in the nature of the person, but yes, you realize your potential as human. The more universal you become, and the more universal you see things, and the more you judge your own actions from a universal perspective, the more universal you become, and that is actualizing precisely your humanity, because the universal fundamentally dwells in the intellect. So in that sense, you become more intellect, which unfortunately, you know, today means, it sounds like you become more intellectual, but that's not what he means by becoming more intellect.
Right. No, I got that. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Sure. I hope it helps. I appreciate you trying to translate all this into Aristotelian terms. Peter, and then Tom.
I think Tom's first.
I saw your hand first, but if you're going to cede, then Tom. No.
Okay, thank you. I think that in interpreting the term primary, to address someone's earlier question, I would say that it actually has two meanings. The one that is most readily available is right on the 5th line of this page that you're seeing here, which says that it is, most universal things, however, are pretty much the most difficult for humans to know, since they are furthest from perception. So that's one sense to me of what primary is. But the other meaning of primary or first is closest to our perception. So those are, the word primary then has to be understood in these two ways, either furthest from us or nearest to us. That's my take.
Right, but there's a homonymy involved in that first, so we have to be clear that, you know, the first in the sense of nearest to us is a different kind of first than that which is most primary and most explanatory. We have to avoid the homonym. But yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. Peter.
Yeah, just responding to Charlie's question about in posterior analytics, he also mentions that all knowledge comes from, at least all scientific knowledge comes from previous knowledge, and that the things that are known best are the things that are known first, or the arche, or the principles things. And any derivative knowledge has to be known with less surety or something than something that is known first. And so there's this sort of hierarchy of that, at least within the posterior analytics.
Right.
So yeah, that the primary things are the things that we know the best and the surest.
Well, that sounds ambiguous, right? Because they're the hardest to know, but they're in themselves the most knowable, and that's the tricky thing to get. You know, what does he mean by that which is in itself most knowable, even if I don't happen to know it?
Yes. Yeah.
Right, and that's a very, very interesting locution that he uses that we haven't explored very much yet. But we don't know them best, but on the other hand, we cannot not know them. It's impossible not to know them, but that doesn't mean you're very clear about them. And it takes a lot of work to get there. But since they are the foundation of all knowledge, of any knowledge, even the knowledge that I don't know, well, I know that I don't know. There's knowledge. It's everywhere. And these primary things are the basis and structure of that knowledge. So we always know that we know. And even we even know that we don't know. And so we can't not know these things. And yet it takes a lot of work to get clear on them and to find out what that, let's call it a priori knowledge, actually consists in. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's how I see it. Does anybody want to follow up on my comment before I head to Brendan?
That's helpful.
Oh, good. Thanks. Brendan. You are still muted, by the way. I'm still not hearing you. Sorry. I don't know what happened.
There we go.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Okay. So, Peter, we were so this whole line of inquiry seems to be going down, like trying to distinguish those things which we know the most, their perceptions, and why they are not the things which are primary, which Aristotle is talking about, right?
Right.
Is that okay? So, I was just thinking, always be careful of when someone uses spatial sort of a language to describe something where the content is actually you're supposed to take it in a certain other way that isn't confused. Like maybe you might call it a slip up because he wasn't being specific enough, but I guess that word primary is probably only supposed to point to one of the connotations of it, right? Which it was Michael was pointing out there. So,
Peter, do you want to follow up on that?
Sorry, I was distracted by something here. Something.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's easy to fall in that trap of thinking of things spatially, so that the language suggests that. You're right, but I think the course of the discussion has made it clear that it's not about that which is spatially closest to us, that but rather what seems most to be knowable, namely what's perceived, and that proves to be eminently not knowable insofar as you just stick with the perceptions. You've got to rise to the level of starting points and causes if you want to know them, and the starting points and causes are never perceived or perceptible.
Or now that I'm reminded of what you were saying, I would say that, yeah, the perceptual things are the most immediate things to us, but on the other hand, we can't actually know the perceptibles without already having known the things through which we will know them, like the forms and the whatnot.
Right.
So it seems like you can look at something and touch it and feel it. It's purple and it's orange and it's thick and whatever. But the thing that's most noticeable are the purple and the concepts, not perceptions.
Exactly. For the simple reason that if we're going to use the word concept, the concept purple never becomes pink, but your book, if it sits in the sun, will go from purple to pink. So the book will change its qualities, but purple will never change its purpleness. So in that sense, it's the most knowable because it doesn't ever deviate from itself. It never becomes other than it is. And so it's most knowable because knowing it, you got it. Whereas knowing your book is purple is a very, very temporary thing because it eventually will change color. Yeah, Sandy.
Can you hear me? I
Yes.
just wanted to know, okay, if I need to put my headphones in. I find it interesting that he starts out the inquiry with these first causes or primary causes, because it seems to me that he has actually already done a whole lot of work just to even get to this point.
Yeah.
Which in some ways is like really cool for us because he kind of just lays it all out there and like, but on the other hand, it also sort of not saying that he said a whole lot by stating that, because like you said, it is kind of a banality to a certain degree. Like it's not super complex to understand. But it does make me wonder where exactly we're going from here. It kind of makes me wonder, like, how many of these, I mean, it seems to me primary causes, there wouldn't be a whole lot, because I mean, if there were, we would just be in some kind of chaos again.
Right.
But on the other hand, just by looking at the size of the book, he seems to have a whole lot to say about them. And I'm just curious about where, what it's going to develop into. So like on the one hand, it makes me think maybe I haven't really got it. You know what I mean? If I don't,
Right.
if I don't see that.
No, there is absolutely no way to know where this book is going from where we are right now. Really.
Okay.
This is not, I mean, some people read it as a continuous argument, and some people look at it as discontinuous. It's I tend to see it as discontinuous, but you can reconstruct a line of argument through here. But in order to do that, you have to disregard a lot of details. What we're still trying to figure out, and we're trying to figure out the relationship between these causes and the science of wisdom, right? So in what way would knowing these causes and knowing what is made possible through them, how would that be a knowledge of being? In what sense would that be a knowledge of being? Or to use his technical term, a knowledge of substance, right? And that's just kind of where we are right now. And he's going to throw a whole bunch of puzzles in our way, because they're the puzzles that that, so to speak, simple reflection and the historical development of philosophical reflection of his time had gotten stuck in. And so there's no adequate solution to any metaphysical problem that isn't a solution to all of these problems. Otherwise you're just creating like some system that just has the same problems as all the other ones, right? And then it's not a solution. So, I mean, so my answer is, yeah, there's no way you can know what's coming from where you are right now. So just enjoy the ride. Right. And what will motivate him to eventually come to what he'll start talking about being qua being. And then he'll start talking about, potency and actuality. And we really only understand why these concepts do the work they do in this text if we understand how they arise from the thinking through of these causes. So in a sense, we will transcend the causes. They're a way station on the way to our goal. Yeah, please go ahead and respond, Sandy.
Yeah, I mean, that's because there is kind of a lot going on at the same time. So sometimes I just get overwhelmed, but I think I do see what you mean when he said that he's talking about the relationships or the relations. And so I just kind of have to make a note of that in my mind, be like, okay, I need to, he wants us to be aware of these relations and why these things are the way they are, but it's not just about relations, right? That's the impression that I have. So
right,
we shouldn't get overly focused on that. And that's
I agree.
Yeah.
And really what we did, the puzzle we discussed last time about whether it's one science or many sciences that are required by the four causes, right? That's already, this thing about there being four causes is already perplexing, right? It's already leading to this question: what makes them all causes? Now let's use the language. What is the being of a cause, such that each one of them is a cause in the same sense? Because maybe we're just using the word cause, but we're using it homonymously, and they're not causes all in the same sense. In which case, they don't all belong to the same group or the same genus. And then we're getting all confused by treating four very different things as if they were example or instances of the same thing. And perception can't help us through this problem. Right? That always comes down to, what makes these four causes a cause? What is the nature of cause? Do each one of these are each one of these a cause in the same sense as the other causes? And that's something you kind of have to grind through the logic. In what sense is the final cause a cause? Is it compatible with the sense in which the efficient cause is a cause, right? And we grind through, the meanings. We try different definitions. We look and see if contradictions arise, and all the rest of it. And so it is a purely intelligible process that we are engaged in order to make sense of these causes, the relationship to one another, whether they're the object of one understanding, one science, or whether we need multiple sciences in order to understand them. Yeah. I don't know how much, but yeah. So all these problems that you're adverting to are actually in a way thematized in the very first set of aporia that he gives us.
Would you like me to move back to B2 now?
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear Sandy's follow up.
Yeah, I just had a question about when he talks about, are there multiple sciences or is there one science? I'm just a little confused about.
Yep.
I mean, I know he hasn't answered that, or maybe he's just posing the question. But I'm kind of confused about where it's going, because maybe it's both, I guess. Well, what if it's both? And then, like, how do you, because he doesn't seem to, he's so not a person who has like a garbage heap where he just throws something on there and says this was a totally red herring or whatever. Right. So I'm interested, I'm just wondering, like, I guess I don't 100% trust him sometimes when he's talking, because right. It seems like, again, he's like knowledge of everything, so everything's going to be relevant somehow. But then it's like we also have to see how the irrelevant stuff is not relevant, but that's still part of. And it's just like, okay, it just kind of like makes your head explode sometimes. So I'm not like, I guess some people might read that and look at this as some kind of battle. Is he going to go with this universalism versus like pluralism or something? And I'm just like, he's obviously not doing that, but then he's talking about it sort of in those terms. So it's.
Yeah, no. I wish this text gave more satisfaction early on, so you feel like you're actually making progress. And so, but it doesn't. And so I try to help with that a little bit and fill in some of the stuff that will come later. But there is fundamentally this sense of perplexity is inescapable all the way through the book. But in taking that perplexity seriously and dwelling in it and not giving it up for some easy answers, this text will not only bring you insights that you could never have had otherwise, but it also just opens up so many other philosophical texts that come after. So it has an historical plus a truth. It has a historical value plus a truth value. Let me see. I saw Brendan and then Peter. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. So I remember hearing Socrates, being ventriloquized by Plato to say, what do you say? You shouldn't believe in things just because a lot of people believe in it. Something, right? But I just recently watched the new Vsauce video. Vsauce, if no one's familiar with it, Michael Stevens, really cool guy. And Sandy's comment about this apparent lack of reasoning and argument at the beginning is kind of perturbing, because I actually encountered that throughout philosophy. It's kind of like, I don't know. So where I'm going with that is I want to say that maybe what you're getting when you read a dense philosophical text and there doesn't seem to be enough reasoning there it's just because there's this sort of harmony with your mind that gives you a sense certainty that this person is going to is really telling the truth, because even if you can't grasp on and reason with everything that he says at first, isn't that sensation good enough for us to trust that uh, that he's saying something worth listening to?
Yeah, no, I'd have just to throw in a quick comment, and then to Peter. That could be a function of the rhetoric, and rhetoric seduces, and it doesn't engage your intellect, but it activates your passions. So so at least for me, as a beginning student, I would always say, read the classics. They're hard for a reason. They're not pandering. And it's not rhetoric that's going to win you over. It's comprehension. And you're going to understand things better, even if you don't understand everything. And that's not a rhetorical achievement. That is an achievement of the intellect. And so, yeah. Peter.
So going back and responding a bit to what Sandy asked about whether there was one science or multiple sciences. And Aristotle is a bit unclear and muddled in his presentation there in B2 on that. But I think that if there were one science of metaphysics of all of causes per se, that would not preclude there being separate sciences of each of the four causes. So we have four other causes, which would go into different details, but they would not, the science of the final cause would not be the same as the science of the material cause, for instance. But there could be a science of all four of them. It gets back to that notion of hierarchy, which we briefly touched on in A2, as well as that point that Tom brought up, and you guys were going about, Tom and Michael were going about the Latin and how just slicing things up and everything. But one of Michael's comments was that bringing more under one umbrella was Aristotle's matter. So having a science of metaphysics at a higher level, but maybe not with all the details,
right,
would not be inconsistent with also having more specific sciences. And he doesn't clearly state in our current reading which way he's going, but my guess is, since the title of the book is Metaphysics, you can go by titles. That's argument by the title of the book. There is probably a science of metaphysics.
We'll find out in the very next chapter, actually. Tyler.
Yeah, regarding the all things phrase, I think part of what's important to understand is that you don't need to know about every particular thing in order to have a knowledge of all things.
Right.
The knowledge of all things is about what it means to be a thing in the first place, such that in knowing, having wisdom about all things, you already know something about any subject, which is the prior knowledge of what distinctions, what acts have to have already taken place in order for us to take these distinct subjects to be matters worthy of inquiry in the first place.
That's well put. Thanks. I'll be right back.
I guess we should talk amongst ourselves.
Chat. Hey, Peter, have you ever had an enjoyable time coding something? Because I remember you. Oh, okay. Banter over.
I don't depart very long for that very reason. All right, let's actually head to the reading for today. It seems like there's something else I wanted to add about that first aporia, but if it occurs to me, I'll add that later. Let's get some reading done about this so-called aporia, about demonstrations, and see if we can make some sense of that. And even better, maybe we can relate it to some of the other stuff that we've already read. Yeah, yeah, well, if you wanted me to lecture and not ask and let anybody else talk, we'd be into this much earlier, but it would be much less enjoyable. All right, would somebody be willing to read out loud P2 on page 34? It's about 3 paragraphs. Let's just, Philip's right. Let's just get the whole thing and then talk about it. But I need a volunteer. Because you guys hear my voice often enough as it is. Okay.
Well, I'll volunteer.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay.
Wait, so, hey, Garth, can you scroll down a bit? Oh, wait, P1. Yeah, we need P2. There it is, thanks. Okay, so we're going into the second aporia about the starting points of demonstration. So go ahead, Charlie, thanks.
Okay. But then about the starting points of demonstration 2, and whether there is one science of them or more than one, there is dispute. By the starting points of demonstration, I mean the common beliefs on the basis of which we all prove things, such as that is in every case it is necessary either to affirm or deny, and that it is impossible for something at the same time to both be and not be, and any other proposition like that. Now I'm going to reread that sentence without that big
Okay, thank you, yeah.
But then about the starting points of demonstration 2, at whether there is one science of them or more than one, there is dispute, namely, about whether there is one science of these and of substance or distinct ones, and if it is not one science, which of the two should be identified with what we are now inquiring into? Well, for there to be one science of them is not reasonable. For how it is more special to geometry than to any science whatever to comprehend them. So if indeed it belongs to every science alike to comprehend them, but cannot belong to all as their special subject, then just as it is not special to the others, neither is it special to the one who knows substances to know about them. At the same time, indeed, in what way can there be a science of them? For what each of them, in fact, is, we know even now, at any rate. Even the various crafts make use of them as things that are known. But if there is a demonstrative science concerned with them, there will have to be some hypothesized genus, as well as attributes, on the one hand, and axioms pertaining to them on the other, since it is impossible for there to be demonstrations of everything. For demonstration is necessarily on the basis of some things about a certain subject and of some things. And so it follows that all provable things belong to some one genus, since all demonstrative sciences make use of the axioms. But then if the science of substance and the science concerned with the axioms are distinct, which of them naturally has more control and is prior? For it is the axioms that are most universal and the starting points of all things. And if not to the philosopher, then to whom does it belong to get a theoretical grasp on what is true and what is false about them?
Thank you. Okay.
So again, some people call these first 3 or 4 aporia the methodological aporia, right? They're asking about whether there is just one kind of knowledge or one knowledge of these things or many. And so before we can even start with our metaphysics, we need to know whether it's one or multiple sciences. Maybe the only way to pursue metaphysics is with multiple sciences, each one of which investigates a partial region of what is, but none of them get everything all at once. That's a possibility he's leaving open. And I did want to just say one thing about this whole unity of science, for the one science. I just wanted to say, you know, what's kind of interesting is today we have physics, and physics studies, the classical definition is matter in motion. And
Matter in motion.
Matter in motion. That was at least the 18th century definition of it. And the point is, you know, from the furthest galaxies to the tiniest microparticles, right? Physics talks about it all, right? And it seems like everything is somehow explicable in terms of physics. So physics has found an object that can be one science about, namely physics, that extends from the hugest and farthest away to the smallest and the closest. And so you can say, well, here, you know, physics has found, it takes a genius to find a perspective that gets so much into one set of assumptions and one set of methods, right? What makes one science one is the set of assumptions and the methods it uses to explore its object. Now, just as a contrasting case, you know, the human being, who studies the human being? Well, it seems like it's the object of quite a few sciences, and none of them quite get the whole human being in its grasp or its ambit, right? We've got psychology and sociology and anthropology and neurology and ethnology and economics. And so if being is like the human being, then we're going to need lots and lots of different sciences to explore being, and none of them are going to be the ruling science, and there's going to be no science. This is the most important part of all. There is going to be no knowledge of how all these little pieces fit together, right? And so if you have many sciences of something like the human being, what you're doing is you're fracturing it into a multiplicity for which there is no longer any unity whatsoever. And that is, so to speak, the danger or the alternative to metaphysics as one science, is that it would explore being. If it's many sciences, it would explore being the way contemporary sciences explores human beings, namely by fragmenting the unity that we know we are and turning it into separate domains of inquiry. And then after Humpty Dumpty has been broken into the many parts, right, there is nobody who can put Humpty Dumpty back together again, right? And one might think that perhaps metaphysics, if there is such a science, would be precisely that set of that understanding, that set of criteria that we require to put something like the human being or something that's been taken apart by the sciences back together again. I'm just putting that out there as a possible way of understanding the import of the unity of metaphysics. Oh, hey, Tim, you've arrived. Let me see. I just wanted to put that out there to show, you know, what's the problem if there's many sciences of being. And so I tried to put my finger on that and how we know that there is the phenomenon of many sciences of the human being. And but right, okay, I think I made my point. So I'm going to let the hands go, and then we'll continue and talk about this text. So first we got Charlie and then Tim.
I have a question just in a basic question, that first paragraph. He's talking about the science of demonstrations, which I assume to be arguments or knowing these statements, the examples of which he gave, about the statement of contradiction. And then he says, is there one science of these and of substance, or
right.
distinct ones? It seems to me that he's, how do you get substance and the idea of argumentation or demonstration together? My idea of substances are individual discrete things. And
Excellent.
You want me to come over there? Or
yeah, what is the comparison here?
oh yeah, I can't wait.
Hey, Bo, sorry, man. Thanks. Hey, does anybody want to address Peter's question? Sorry, Charlie's question. Anybody who knows some posterior analytics, perhaps? Right. Peter, you're on mute. I don't know if you're trying to answer or not. No? Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to say very briefly.
Greg has a hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Sorry, Greg, I didn't see you. Thanks.
A real hand, not to click on the buttons.
I didn't have you.
All the physical sciences still have to use these rational principles of the law of no contradiction. And so then they would all have to know them. And yet there would have to be some meta science of the principles that all the other sciences already have to know. And that means all the other sciences would have to be knowledge of the principles of demonstration, because they're like universal. They're in everything that we're
Exactly. I think that's totally the salient point, that because they are universal and they're part of every science, it seems like every science knows something through these demonstrative principles, and perhaps that's being. Now, because they're the most universal, maybe the theory of demonstration actually gives us the theory of being, because they are every science that deals with some region of being or another. So it seems like they're a good candidate, like knowing these is to know being, and therefore to know what substance is. I'm gonna correct one thing that I hear snuck in, and I heard sneak in Charlie's remarks, that Peter or somebody else brought up at the very beginning. Oh no, it was Mike. Don't get too hung up on the idea of substances being particular. Totally right. That's how they've been introduced. That's how we looked at them in the categories. And there's been some suggestion that they might be material particular things. But there's also been a lot of discussion in the first book about whether they might be forms and therefore universal. And so the forms would be the substance of things, and the study of forms would be the study of substance.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, he's already showed his hand a little bit in a couple of passages that we've already read, that he sometimes will call substance, essence, or form. So he's already at least opening up the possibility that that is precisely form that might be substance, and not this horse or this man as a composite.
Good, that helps.
Okay, great. I appreciate it. Thanks. Let's see. I got some hands. I got Tim next.
Yeah, I think you guys kind of made the point that I was going to make, and maybe in a little bit different way. But when you were talking about how that science is fractured into a number of different sciences, I think we can all relate to that, because it is kind of hard for scientists to talk to each other across disciplines. And so, but yet we all think of science as theoretically able to encompass everything, all knowledge.
Right. Yeah.
Which then implies that science itself requires a metaphysic. It is kind of a metaphysical perspective that is above or transcendent or fundamental to the any individual science. So it's kind of ironic in a way.
I agree. I think that's a very, very nice observation. And if scientists were a little bit more Aristotelians, they would say, that's a puzzle we have to work through. But the usual gesture is instead, well, we'll get to that later. Yeah, that's on the horizon still. We'll solve that later down the road. Sorry, my dog is going crazy. I gotta close my door. Yeah, okay, let me see. We got several hands here. Mike, I see you gesticulating wildly. That means you probably want to get in on the most recent.
No, I was just making triple hands. No, I'll go third.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, let's rip through these guys. Clark, and then Richard, and then Mike.
Yeah, two things. One, to Charlie's point, I'm chewing on Parmenides' unity of thought with being, and the unity of what would be the first science, or the science before all sciences, and I just go to that he's trying to speak to that level of abstraction of being and thought in some respect. And the second thing I wanted to say, and I don't know, that's just what's been going through my mind. The other thing is, the only way I can listen to this, I have to constantly translate, because my understanding of science is so different than it's being represented here. So just to let you know, whenever you speak of science, I mean, just generally in the context of learning Aristotle, I call that science one. And what I consider to be, modern science, that's science two. Okay. And they're completely different. They're so different. And unfortunately, I keep looking for some recognition in Aristotle of science two. I don't find it yet. So I'm interested in that. Because, and this would be a larger subject. Of course, I'd have to back up what I'm kind of arguing about there being a science two, but I'm just letting you know that I have difficulty translating all this.
No, I think stipulating these two sciences, I think it's brilliant, and it's helpful to keep the two apart. And the more we understand Aristotelian science, the more we can look. I mean, I'm already doing it in my spare time, but I would love to do a seminar on it, on reading a little bit of Galileo and Copernicus and Kepler, at least in their fundamental definitions, and how Aristotelian might see the problems in the way in which they're going about things. I think it would be a magnificent seminar, but unfortunately, we got to get enough Aristotle under our belt to read those texts responsibly, rather than what's the term? Whiggishly, right? Just Whig history is just always assuming the later people are the better people. Right?
Better history. Yep. Sign me up.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Clark. Thanks. Richard.
Can you remind me and relate substance and essence?
Oh. Well, we haven't. He hasn't talked about it very much.
Okay.
So I think that the only reason why I mentioned that is because it jumped out at me, right? So I just wanted to just bring it up that this linguistic shift is going on in Aristotle, and one might think, well, that's a mistake, but but given what's going to come later, where form is going to take on much more prominent role, and form and essence are going to be interchangeable, and that they're going to be identified with substance, just to give the story away. I just want to say that so to speak, the linguistic evidence is starting to pile up a bit. But that doesn't mean he's not going to argue. He's going to argue up the wazoo, but he's not just going to rely on a linguistic evidence, or he's not going to just start changing the subject and say, well, instead of substance, they're going to call form, and I'm not going to argue for it. That's not how he rolls. So I just wanted to alert you to that is already part of our text. Is that okay as an answer? Yeah, thanks, Richard. Appreciate it. Mike.
Yeah, just going over what Clark mentioned in some of the comments in the chat. Okay. So I think science, Clark and I had a little exchange about science, and I guess how it's practiced and how we understand science. I do think at this stage, Aristotle is talking about science a lot more generally and not really assuming any methods. And I think when he means that there are two different sciences to explain, one for sort of the axioms and the methods and whatnot, and then one for the substance, whether it's particular or not. I think he means that a science that in a way is mutual, that are not compatible with each other. For example, something like pathology, right, would be, its genus would be medicine, and they wouldn't be separate from each other. So I think if you think, one would think that pathology and medicine are not separate science. Excuse me, separate sciences. On the other hand, if we look at physics, for example, and contemporary physics, we have quantum physics or quantum chromodynamics, right? And general relativity, which both are purporting to describe the natural world, but in a lot of ways, both are incompatible. So I think in that way, we can say that there are two different sciences, and already we see a problem with that. I don't know if we really know why we see a problem with that, but for some reason we know that if we're describing the one, the natural world, but we have two different sciences for that, we don't like that. So I think there's that. And then the other thing I was gonna say. Anyway, oh yeah, and Charlie, you mentioned demonstration, and I noticed in the Reeve translation on page 318 and footnote 279, I just wanted to point out that at least in that footnote, they have a very specific meaning of, I guess, what a demonstration is, and a demonstration has to have the three components. It has to posit what it posits to exist. It's got to have those common axioms, and third, I guess, the attributes. I still don't understand it fully, but I think, yeah, when they do talk demonstration, there is something very specific rather than, and I'm not saying this is what you were meaning, Charlie, but rather than just hand wavy, hey, look,
Posterior analytics, by the way.
But yeah, I know.
I know. And,
I haven't heard it.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that. And I read that, but these are more quotes from Aristotle. They don't help me a lot.
I mentioned this, but it hasn't helped me either, Charlie. So I agree with you.
Right, but I mean, for a demonstration to take place, you have to, to not just talk Aristotle, but you need to have something that you're inferring from, and you need to have something that you're inferring to. And so any demonstration is based on inference of drawing a conclusion from premises, and you have to have rules for getting from your premises to your conclusion so that you can deduce validly. So we're basically kind of just talking about syllogism, but we add that we're only going to get valid conclusions from our premises if we're clear about the genus within which our demonstration is taking place. And so we will be able to deduce the attributes of things and why things have the attributes that they have based on our axioms and the genus and the description of the genus that gives us the premises. And then we have a demonstration within one science. Demonstrations can happen outside of sciences too, but when we're talking about the unity of the science, we've got to have this. We have to have enough unity so that that when we infer from our premises to our conclusions, we still know we're talking about the same thing. That the underlying subjects haven't changed from our premises to our conclusion. That so maybe that helps, maybe it doesn't. Charlie, go ahead.
Just quickly, the idea of demonstrations, I understand that. You know, you follow all the rules in order to get to
Right.
the QED. Therefore, you've established it.
Right.
He's talking here in this section about causes, and causes as being the premier science or the basic science of everything. I'm having trouble thinking about demonstrations and the process of argumentation and the process of getting to the conclusion of a demonstration and causes, you know, within the context of the four, the efficient, the final, the material, and the formal.
Right. Peter, go ahead.
I think perhaps his point is that he's asking can there be a science of the causes as altogether? And if a science requires that these things all be the things that the science of all be related under one genus, that's why we have to ask whether or not the four causes are under one genus. Otherwise, we cannot have a scientific demonstration because there's nothing that relates the four things. They're just four unrelated things.
Right.
And there can be no principle of the four things that you could then use the axioms that Mike had alluded to, the three parts, the attributes of the axioms and the starting points, whatever it was. So I think that he's asking what would it would take to be a science of the causes, and that's why he's bringing in demonstration, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you. That helps.
I do want to say one more thing that I probably didn't make explicit enough when I first adverted to it. Every science studies something. And since it only studies something, there are other things that it doesn't study. Now, if we think of all of reality as chopped up amongst all the different sciences, right? Each one excludes the others, right? That's comprehensible, right? But what do they have all in common? The principles of demonstration. So it seems like the principle of demonstrations apply to all things equally. The sciences themselves cut out a region and study it. But every science relies on these principles of demonstration. So maybe what's common to all things, being, is precisely what's got at, what we access through the principles of demonstration. And that would mean that whatever the starting points of demonstrations are, right, they would be a reflection of being itself and not just a region of being. So that's why it seems like the starting points of demonstrations, and he doesn't say demonstrations, but the starting points of demonstrations might be candidates for the study of substance and therefore be the science of wisdom. Studying them. Richard.
Would this be a bad time to kind of like inject like postmodernist critique that the siloing of our sciences, serves to maintain the status quo of the power of the existing power structure and order? Anyway, it just like, sorry, it just. No,
actually, just make your point. I mean, I'm kind of interested to see how you see this dovetailing with what we're talking about. So,
so for example, like, I mean, I think it's something that's like more kind of in the forefront now, but like how economics is taught kind of in a silo, like these ideas of economic liberalism, which is always kind of completely behind this wall of simultaneously what was happening with those ideas, like vis-a-vis history and study of colonialism, and and how these economic ideas basically now get repackaged into a sort of Ponzi scheme, except now with the disadvantage and impossibility that the developing nations have no others to exploit, and extract and other places to extract resources from.
Right, so you just to be clear, you're offering kind of a deconstructive take on the validity of the structure of a science, in this case economics, right? And and putting into question, justifiably, I think, it's whether it has a so-called objective relationship to truth or not. Is that fair, or did I miss your point entirely?
No, I think that's a fair response to, I guess, my direction of inquiry, which you're free to also like say that's something that can be discussed elsewhere. But I just sort of had a response to that.
No, and Richard, I appreciated the brevity and precision of your remark, and I have no doubt that that these more general ramifications of some of the stuff that we're talking about, I think is of general interest. So I totally appreciate it. I think that was great.
Can I interject after Tyler?
Yes, yeah. Okay, we got a cue. Tyler, then Garth.
Yeah, I think so. The idea that we have these kind of silos or sort of separated off sciences is what occurs when a society, in some sense, has lost the science of science or the science of sciences. So I think it wouldn't hold as a critique of Aristotle, because Aristotle is stressing the importance of the very thing that is needed for them not to end up fractured in that way, as sort of these separate, maybe often rhetorical or pragmatic only,
right,
sciences that cannot be understood in relation to each other, but simply appeal to, authority or status or whatever it is.
No, I love that. I appreciate that, because any science is fundamentally based on pragmatic criteria of usefulness and practicality. Always will invite the Marxian question, cui bono, right? Whose good is this practicality, right? Who does it benefit? Not everybody, right? And so by founding our theories of science on pragmatic criteria, we're in fact confessing that that they're for the good of some, even though they always say they're good for the good of everybody. So no, I like that point. Thanks very much. As a continuation of Richard's point, Garth.
Yeah, I don't know how fair it is to. I mean, I think that there is a lot of validity to. Who was it that was making that point? Richard before?
Yeah.
There's a lot of validity to what Richard says, but I don't think that we can say that this, just because these sort of like bad results happened, that it means that the science is wrong. Because we also have to ask whether the science is being carried out correctly. And I think in the case of economics, there was a large variety of views on these matters, but it was politically expedient to highlight certain views which were very pro-free market in order to carry out the political narrative of the Cold War and triumph over communism and that kind of thing, which led to a very conservative turn in the politics in the Western world, especially in the United States. But like, what do Hegel and Marx say about economics? Marx does not take a view that is extremely critical of the theoretical framework or the axioms of economic theory. He actually draws the ultimate conclusion of what those axioms say, which is that you end up with a fundamentally unstable system. And so it's not really, it's not just a matter of the science, but whether the science itself is being carried out well. And I think in the case of economics, there's like huge bodies of work that were ignored. And if people are going to argue that science should be based on data, like economists always say economics should be based on data. Well, a lot of those like free market theories, like I don't remember who, Solow, Arrow, forget the other guy that Piketty talks about in his book. These guys basically either didn't do the work to actually crunch the data that was available, or they ignored the data that was available in order to push their free market narratives. So anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. So awesome. I mean, it's a complex topic, but I think that everything dovetails very, very interesting. That it's just the way in which contemporary science is kind of, it can't escape the problems of ideology. So, and that's interesting, and that might be a weakness of science. And we can ask, once we understand Aristotle, whether it's prone to the same kind of misuse, or whether there's something about the way in which it formulates unity and the unity of the sciences that lifts it out of any kind of easy ideological partisanship. Okay, yeah, thanks for spearheading that. But back to demonstrations. All right, so I think we've at least talked, I don't know if we've clarified, but we've talked a little bit about how Aristotle uses demonstrative science. I think, maybe people are comfortable with, why the starting points of demonstration being the most universal of sciences, in a sense, since every science employs them, might be a candidate for the science of wisdom. And what we need to do is get a little bit deeper into some of the arguments he brings pro and contra to this idea, so we understand the problem. Obviously, the solution comes later. So, but is there anything left in anybody's craw in the second paragraph that Charlie read?
I mean, I guess that question goes with what you just said, and then a question that was forming in my mind. So, isn't Aristotle's point that the science of axioms is more fundamental than the science of demonstration, because the axioms are on what demonstration stands? Am I missing that point, or?
No, that's a good question. Let's look at that. I kind of understood that all the parts of demonstrations are equally fundamental. And so it seems to me like he's making the argument that you can't have a higher genus for demonstrating that, right, from which you demonstrate that demonstrations have certain properties.
Well, that last paragraph that we read, but then if the science of substance and the science concerned with the axioms are distinct, which of them naturally has more control and is prior?
Mm-hmm.
Or it is the axioms that are most universal and the starting points of all things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that suggests to me that the science of axioms
mm-hmm.
are foundational to the science of substance or the demonstrative. The assuming that the demonstrative sciences mean the science of substance.
Right. Well, oh, go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to point out, yeah, I think that the science of demonstration is, science of axioms, qua axioms, but if there's going to be a science of substance, that would have its own particular axioms. And those are different than how axioms in some sense work. So logic, if to use a simple word, he calls them the common beliefs, but logic would work across all the sciences. And if there were a particular science of substance, it might have its own particular axioms.
So I'm thinking that, and Tim and Peter's points just brought me to this, that maybe starting points of demonstrations and axioms are synonyms. And that would make sense because every demonstration is from some specific genus, premises that belong to a genus, to specific attributes. And so they're obviously not the universal part. It's the axioms, like it's either in every case it's necessary to affirm or deny, or it's impossible at the same time to both be and not be. Right? These are the immediate, non-demonstrable starting points of any demonstration. And so they would be the most universal of all the aspects of demonstration. I guess that's one way to put it.
Well, I can see how you're constructing that. However, he says in the sentence two sentences above the paragraph that I just read, for demonstration is necessarily on the basis of some things.
Right.
About a certain subject and of some things. So that seems to be not the universal, but the more particular. And
Right.
so it follows the
But
all provable things.
the axioms, I'm just going to interject and say it's the axioms that get you from one part of the demonstration to the next. And so it's only on the basis of it's only through the axioms that we get from the certain subject, right, as genus or whatever, to its attributes.
Sorry to interrupt, Tim and Michael. Peter pointed out footnote 287 that it helped me. And maybe it might be worthwhile to read that. And I'm sorry, this is in the Reeves. I can read it too. It's on page, Garth, on page, oh man, let me get it, 320.
Yeah, go ahead and read it.
So there does not seem to be a demonstration of the what something is. So this is the first part, given the premise or whatever, the thing in its, I shouldn't say thing in itself, but the what something is. A demonstrative science is concerned with the intrinsic coincidence of a single genus. If that same demonstrative science also deals with the substances in the genus, as opposed to these attributes, it would have to demonstrate their essential definition or the what it is of each of them. But since these are starting points of the science's demonstrations, the science cannot be a demonstrative science of them. Because it's an assumption already, I guess.
Right. So I'm just going to explicate this in a way that might oversimplify it, but that's a danger I'm willing to court here. A science of nature, a demonstrative science of nature is going to start with assuming there are things that change. And so it's going to assume the existence of things that change. And in order to be demonstrative, it has to assume something, right, about a certain subject. It has to assume a certain subject, changing things, right? And on the basis of some things, axioms, principles of inference, right, we find out some other things, right? Like whatever the attributes of changeable things are. And it's only that way, it's only through these axioms, through the inferences, that we get scientific knowledge of changeable things, things that move, things that change. Otherwise, all we get is we go around and we describe, well, that changes, and this changes, and that changes. And all we do is get a huge laundry list of changeable things, but no comprehension about what the essential attributes and accidental attributes of changeable things are. So we gain no comprehension of them. All we get is a laundry list. So, so I think with that example, you can kind of see how a demonstrative science works. It assumes something, and then it infers something else about that thing it assumes. And it does that on the basis of the axioms, i.e. the starting points of demonstration. And that's why, you know, there's no Aristotelian proof of the existence of anything. You can't prove existence. You have to assume it in order to explore some, what's essential about it, like changing things or unchanging things or mathematical objects, right? Or you assume points and lines, and then you start constructing things with them and then investigate the properties, but you have to assume those mathematical objects in order to gain scientific knowledge about them. So thanks, Tom. You probably have some precisions to make on what I just said. I appreciate you piping up.
I would add to what Mike read in that footnote to say that there are indemonstrable premises, and that those premises can be gained not by demonstration itself, because that would be circular and recursively forever.
Right.
And so because of that, the location where Aristotle started to say that you have to have a kind of a definition or an account, that is cited in Posterior Analytics, Book 2, Chapter 10. So if you read that, then you'll be able to see that this is how you can get around the recursion to forever. And then, of course, Chapter 19 will tell you the final step from everything else.
Thank you. Tim, you want to pick it up?
Well, I'm just wondering then, what is the science concerned with the axioms? He says it's distinct from the science of substance. And what I hear is that the axioms are necessary to the science of substance because you have to assume something. But then this science of axioms, if it's not demonstrable and it's not about proof, it's just about assumption, then what is left to that science to do?
Isn't that wisdom, what he calls Sophia?
Yeah, but why is it a science? I mean, what is science-y about it?
About what?
About the science of axioms.
Oh,
I don't think you can have a science of the starting point
Yeah.
of an assumption, right? You can't have a scientific demonstration of what you assume.
Right.
Right, and that's my question. What is the science of axioms? What do you do when you're doing the science of axioms?
That's the science of how. That's like his logic, right? That's his given syllogisms, given various the statements, propositions. What are the acceptable ways of deriving new knowledge from the old ones?
So then the science of axioms is about logical proof then, whereas the science of substance is about demonstrative proofs, but not logical demonstration, but let's say substantial demonstration.
I don't think there's a distinction here between logical and demonstrative. I think.
But I think we're getting, sorry to interrupt. I think we're getting hung up on the notion of science. Science is just episteme, right? So it's knowledge. And so he says that there is no demonstrative science of demonstration, right? So there's not that kind of knowledge of demonstration, not that kind of knowledge about axioms, but there is knowledge about axioms, right? Which propositions count as axioms, and what their role is in deriving conclusions, and that would be a knowledge of axioms. But to say that there's a higher order of science from which you could deduce axioms would be incorrect, and I think that we might be being led to that notion by this use of the word science. So let's distinguish between science as such, which is just knowledge, and then kinds of science, one of which would be demonstrative science. So I apologize to interrupt, Garth. I'm going to let you go first, and then Sandy.
Yeah, I think you made a good point that maybe our problem is like what I forget who said that earlier, science 1 versus science 2, right? Like this has been translated from the Greek, right? I was going to say something that I don't really want to say anymore, but I do sort of think the method involved here is that you start with the axioms and then you see what follows, and that this is essentially the only way to reason. And if you start reasoning from something that you assume, then the thing that is doing the work behind the scenes is these axioms. And philosophy, right? We want to uncover what these axioms are, so that we can have a clearer idea of what we are actually doing when we're reasoning. Otherwise, we're sort of groping around blindly.
Exactly. Well said. Thank you. Sandy.
I just wanted to, just after kind of listening to what everyone has been saying and sort of putting it back at what my thought earlier was, I am starting to notice, well, like when I said earlier, that he's starting out with these primary causes, but it seems like he's put a lot of work into it already before he got there. And then when I hear people keep referencing all these other Aristotle works, which is not the one we're reading, it does make me realize that, yeah, he did put in all that work, and those works exist, and we can read them, and basically we have to read them. And so I'm getting a sense that Aristotle he's not a linear kind of thinker, in that sense, that all of his work, almost like a Proustian kind of thing, are sort of like cycling into this one unity, which is helpful. So even though, because I think it was Charlie who was like, all you're doing is referencing more Aristotle, that's not helping me more understand Aristotle. But it's like, in some ways it is helpful just as a passive listener, because I'm like, oh, okay, I'm like slowly starting to understand. But I just have the impression that you just have to jump in at some point, like a jump rope game, like it's already in motion and you just jump in at some point, and then we'll start getting into the rhythm. Does that sound like it makes sense? Because I wasn't, I think when we start any philosopher, we always kind of have to get used to their, world or their approach. And so now I'm kind of seeing, okay, this is how Aristotle is. And I don't know, chronologically or whatever, which works came before this one. I'm just totally naively reading what you're recommending us, right? So yeah. I'm actually starting to find it helpful when people start mentioning posterior analytics or all these other things, like, even though I haven't read it, because it's like the pieces are coming together in my mind. So at least I can say I got that far this session.
No, that is absolutely fabulous. And I certainly encourage everybody to just grab other Aristotelian texts, while we're reading the metaphysics, because you're always going to find passages that just like, oh God, that's what he was talking about in the metaphysics, right? It's and it's a little bit happenstance what those passages are going to be and which ones they're going to like blow you away, that they're all of a sudden it's so clear. So yeah, like ideally we would be reading all of Aristotle at the same time, and and then we'd really get it. But unfortunately, finite beings, we're prisoners of time. Things have to go one thing after another. So we can't live according to the intellect like we'd like to. Yeah, so here we are doing our best. But you're exactly right. I think that is exactly the right attitude. If this text is immeasurably hard, but if you take it that way, then I think you're getting a lot more out of it. Yeah, so that's awesome. Tyler.
Yeah, I may have lost my thought, but I'm going to take a stab at it anyway.
Sorry.
No, that's on me. So I think one of the concerns we have here is the demand that we somehow prove the act of proving, which itself would presuppose that it itself is an act of proving something.
Right.
And so we do have to be careful not to end up in an infinite regress. In some sense, proof cannot prove itself either from nothing, and the demand that we prove anything from nothing, of course, undermines all explanation and all proof itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then the proof from a content which includes proof itself is a sort of self-proving, and we can be wary of, I think the wariness there is of circularity.
Yeah.
But there's an important distinction to be made between vacuous circularity and circularity that explains the whole through the parts and the parts through the whole. Excellent. Which I think is not vacuous.
Well put.
Virtuous.
Yeah, that's. I wish we had time to explore that thought, because I think it's incredibly important about the whole part-whole logic as opposed to propositional logic that undermines the suspicion of circularity in all cases. Propositional logic will always look circular in a certain way because it's because of the way it's organized. But part-whole logic, you can see how virtuous circles work. So I think that's a great point, and I wish we could flesh it out more, because it's super important, because people always, are suspicious when they think they see circular reasoning, and they should be. But the highest matters, how they're related to one another, is not through something higher, because they're already highest. And so their relationships is not going to be through yet another higher thing, but through each other. And that's going to be modelable, or we can think about it better in part-whole relations rather than in propositional relations in which certain assumptions are made and certain assumptions are made, et cetera. Yeah. So, yeah, thanks. Sandy, go ahead.
Or sorry, a quick clarification. Like, Tyler ended, I think if I heard correctly, Tyler ended his kind of summary clarification like with vacuous, and then someone said virtuous. Are you correcting him, or I was trying to understand that exchange.
Go ahead, Peter.
He was just trying to say, find the opposite of a vacuous circularity. And I was saying a virtuous circularity would be the opposite of a vacuous one.
Okay. Thank you.
But of course, the opposite would actually be a contentful one. So we got to get to virtuous and vicious. That's the proper opposition. Okay. Tyler threw you off, Peter. It's okay. Sandy, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say, thanks for Tyler to saying that, because there is, I guess, a risk of thinking like, well, is Aristotle just a self-referential pomo hipster before his time? Like, where it's like we just answer everything Aristotle said with another thing Aristotle said, and then you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, but it's like, no. And then some people were pointing out in the chats, well, we lost a lot of his work, so that makes it harder. So when you put it all in that context, you're like, no, he's not a self-referential hipster, because in some ways, I think it because of the confusion and everything, I think it could be a danger to just throw the towel in on him for that reason, And it's really interesting. I have obviously come across these difficulties before with thinking, but I never thought of it so clearly in that way. So thanks. I know I'm going to just stop there, because I know you said you want to develop it further, but at least just introducing it was helpful to me.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, no, I would love to. I said I would love to develop, but I'm not going to. That would be a separate meeting or two, working through whole and parts logic and how it's different. But anyway, yeah, so awesome. There's something I wanted to say about what you said, but just as an interesting historical aside, the Greeks made a distinction between the exoteric and what later became known as the esoteric. And the esoteric was part of the inner circle, and the exoteric were the public writings. But that distinction between esoteric and exoteric rests on a prior distinction, which is exoteric public and acroamatic, and which is what's read and heard. It's actually hearing based. So the things you hear, acroamatic, are opposed to the public writings, which are disseminated. So these texts were read while the peripatetics were walking around their little lyceum, and they were read and discussed, and so they're written in a very different way, and they're written in an acroamatic way and not an exoteric way, which Aristotle had exoteric writings that were more logical, very supposedly actually quite stylistically beautiful, but every one of them has been lost. Every one of them. So all we have are the acroamatic writings. All right, we have 3 minutes to clarify any lingering questions about this section. It doesn't make any sense to jump into the next one yet. I found that conversation really incredibly illuminating. So I really appreciate the intensity of it. Charlie.
I just had one quick comment about the axioms.
Yeah.
I think those could be described as a prioris, or self-evident principles that you just can't go beyond them, and there would be no reason it's impossible to try to argue, demonstrate them, because they're simply self-evident. And they really stand as a basis on their own. But that's
Right.
all I was going to comment about.
Right.
So Michael, could you just put in a nutshell, could you just identify really succinctly what the science of substance is and what the science of axioms are?
Okay, so the knowledge of substance would be the knowledge of substance would be the way in which we know all things. We know all things in a certain way that does not include everything that you can know in a particular science of things, right? Just like it's like at the beginning of the wisdom, right? Knowledge of substance would allow you that if there is knowledge of substance. And knowledge of axioms, I'll just put it in the sense that we can have methods for figuring out which are the proper axioms, not by deriving them, but by dialectically refuting the contrary thesis. That's how ultimate things are argued for, not from higher principles, because there are none, but dialectically by rejecting the alternatives. And so that would be acquiring knowledge of the axioms insofar as we would then know what they are, what the criterion of them are, and that would allow us to collect them and also to examine their role in how they make any particular science possible, because they allow us to get from the premises to the conclusions with necessity rather than just haphazardly.
Okay, so then both are within the realm of metaphysics then?
Yes.
Okay.
You know,
maybe are the axioms the categories?
No. He is going to answer this, I think, in the next chapter. But what I'm basically going to say is, just that the axioms are indeed part of the science of substance. So knowing what is at the same time knowing what's relevant to know it. And so here, so what I want to say is that there is this coalescing, and Aristotle will make the point that there's this coalescing between metaphysics and logic in the theory of substance. And so knowing substance is also knowing the axioms. And so logic is internal to the study of substance, and the study of substance is internal to logic. You can only do it logically. They are intimately intertwined. They're just two sides of the same coin.
But the axioms are not derived from logic.
No. They are coincident.
So give me an example of an axiom.
I don't have anything handy right now. Sorry.
Okay. That would help. I've got to get my head around like what we're really talking about.
Oh, but I mean the ones that he already gave us, right? It's impossible for something to at the same time be and not be, for instance, would be one of the axioms.
I see.
And there's somewhere, but there's a larger list of some of the axioms. I don't have it handy right now.
And that's not a category?
No. Because
isn't being a category? I guess it's not really a category, is it?
It's substance, that's the thing. We've got this weird word substance to work with, but actually the Greek is beingness, right? Substance is beingness, what really is.
Yeah.
Mike.
So I just wanted to call out what you just said.
Yeah.
And I guess, it's a reward for all of us who stayed until the end, because I thought that was very profound, that the axioms are, to separate the science of the axioms from the science of substance is erroneous. They are one and the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds very important. I don't understand it yet, or if ever, but
Right.
It sounds quite profound, but I wanted to call that out.
But I don't think we should take that too far, because Aristotle says they're distinct.
No, he says if they're distinct, if we take them as, right, he's giving a pro and contra argument. If they're the same, we get into this problem. If they're different, we get into this other problem. So we have an aporia, and that's one of the problems that metaphysics will have to solve. Take care, Sandy.
Okay.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I misread it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, what I want to say is that there is logic. There is self-evident. Charlie mentioned self-evident truths or whatever, right? There's that because there's knowledge of being, there's knowledge of substance. Because there's knowledge of substance, there are self-evident truths, and those self-evident truths are the basis of logic. And so logic and being spill into one another. Each is a mirror image of the other. And then, yeah. So I can't spell it out more than that right now, but I did want to at least indicate the direction of Aristotle's ultimate take on the relationship between metaphysics and logic. And this section is actually just a really good way to kind of reflect on our own time and the way in which logic has been divorced from metaphysics and become formal logic and become a tool rather than it become a tool of other inquiries rather than being itself the reflection on being qua being. And our time has hollowed out logic because of the way in which it thinks logic and metaphysics as being two radically separate things. But Aristotle's point is that indeed is allows us neither to understand being nor to understand logic. Absolutely, always got to get a little modernity critical every once in a while just to keep people on their toes. Well, we're well after 6, so people can scoot whenever they want. I appreciate it. So and for anybody who missed the beginning, we're going to go on a 2-week schedule now and no more breaks. You take a break when you need a break, but always know that at least I will be trudging on with Aristotle all year, no breaks, but on every 2-week schedule. And that will allow me to do my prep a little bit better and to indulge in some other readings once in a while. So yeah, until otherwise announced, we will meet 2 weeks from today. I can't be here next week anyway.
Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Take
Thank you.
care. We'll see you
Bye.
then. Bye-bye.
Thank you.